gatekeeping problem in the fantasy community and in pretty much every nerd community as a whole, and it's responsible for so many of the negative stereotypes assigned to nerds that do hold up and live to this day.
Gatekeeping, a truly unnecessary and foolish concept that has weirdly existed within human culture for a very long time. Right now, it is running rampant through the Trek community, but it has also reared its ugly head in almost every recent major pop culture franchise.
Greetings and salutations, everyone. The topic for this video is one that can be classified as a controversial subject in the realm of pop culture. Wherever it is brought up, it is almost certain to cause an uproar. I'm referring, of course, to gatekeeping. It's a word often thrown about when the fans of a piece of entertainment, movie, TV show, comic, game, what have you, revolt against what they see as a poor decision by the writer or writers responsible. The recent end of Game of Thrones was a classic example. Longtime watchers were outraged at the sloppy wrap-up of the show's interweaving plots, but some stepped forward to call out gatekeeping. They accused the angry fans of entitlement, of trying to claim ownership of their entertainment, to steal it away from the hard-working people who actually made it and from the fans who actually enjoyed that ending. This is, at best, a tone-deaf response to fans getting mad.
Incompetence should not be rewarded with blind loyalty.
Often, a closer look will suggest that the fans have a valid beef against the creators. When it comes to the concept of gatekeeping, I myself firmly believe that it is sometimes a necessity. Now, before you dislike the video and leave comments calling me an entitled snob, hear me out. I assure you, I do have a point that I am trying to make. I'll try to lay out in an orderly fashion why I think gatekeeping can be a good thing. But in order to do that, I'm going to have to explain the two groups I see fandom falling into. For lack of any better term, I'll have to call them the geeks and the normies. There are a couple of things that I feel I must make very clear. First off, I am by no means a professional or an expert. The points that I will be making here are based off of my own observations and subsequent perception of both crowds. Secondly, while I do consider myself a geek in terms of how I digest pop culture, I want to make it very clear that I have absolutely nothing against the normies. I'm not going to call either side stupid here. Also, I usually hate to use generalizations. I believe that people should be treated as individuals with their own thoughts and ideas and should not be treated as a monolith. But there is no way for me to explain my thinking here, unless I use collective terms. Now that I have got that out of the way, let's get into it. Geeks and normies can both be fans of the same things. So the question is, what is it in their attitudes that separates them? The difference, I think, is in the attitude with which they approach their media of choice. I think there are a couple of things there that set geeks and normies apart in this context. The first can be boiled down to two words: subjectivity and objectivity. I believe that normies fall into the camp of subjectivity and the geeks fall into the camp of objectivity. A normie approaches a piece of media with a fairly uncritical mindset. They want to be entertained, and they judge it by how well it does that job. Essentially, a primary question they ask themselves is, am I enjoying this? Is this to my taste? Geeks, on the other hand, are analytical and approach media with an analytical eye. They don't limit themselves to asking whether they like a piece of media. They go on to ask, how good is this? Is it particularly well done in certain aspects? In fact, for this type, a great deal of the fun lies in the analysis itself, in speculation and imagination about the world revealed through this media. And the more it caters to this mindset, by the way, the more the geeks love it. So they can love the same thing for different reasons. The normies are captivated by it, and the geeks relish digging into its depths. Where the gatekeeping part comes in is when the geeks find normies coming into their media and get overprotective of it. The reason geeks stop accepting normies is that, at times, the unconditional love and admiration of the normies for a work can be exploited and pandered to by those actually creating it, and geeks usually feel that the work itself suffers as a result. It doesn't help that the attitude of unconditional admiration is exactly what many creators and producers wish to cultivate, for the purpose of making more money from their work. As Jay from Red Letter Media puts it, They don't want people to think about the cultural products they're consuming. They just want you to eat it unthinkingly and then get excited for the next mouthful.
Don't ask questions. Just consume product and then get excited for next product.
Let me give a few examples of what I'm thinking about. Many of the media that geeks love have deep world building and deep thoughts for them to get their teeth into, and one of the clearest examples I can think of is the Star Trek franchise, pre-J.J. Abrams. I don't think you could convincingly argue that Star Trek sustains itself entirely on empty spectacle. It dives into high concept and philosophical ideas on a regular basis, and does so with a cast of unique characters, each carrying their own history and their own perspective. It wants to entertain, of course, but it also aims to be more than just entertainment. It aspires to say something interesting about the human condition, and many geeks will say this is a hallmark of all good science fiction and fantasy. Now, there are very notable exceptions of pop culture media that can appeal to both geeks and normies alike. The biggest example I can think of off the top of my head is Star Wars, the original trilogy. The dogfights in space, the shootouts and lightsaber fights, the alien worlds and alien races, the basic and fundamental battle of good against evil, all that obviously appealed to the normies. What kept the geeks coming back was the lore, the tremendous amount of world building George Lucas carried out in those 3 films. There was room for more stories and more speculation everywhere, as should be obvious from the sheer size the expanded universe had attained by the time Disney and Lucasfilm decided to wipe the slate clean. Another good example of pop culture media successfully catering to both the geek and normie crowds is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, for the very reasons that made Star Wars so appealing to both sides of the audience. Stylish action, visual flair, and character drama to appeal to the normies, with a million little touches that only the geeks could appreciate. However, in the last few years our media seem to have been infected with a plague of money-minded Hollywood executives. They have tried to capitalize on geek culture by taking geek things and, for lack of a better phrase, flattening them out to appeal to the normies. Geeks resent this because it means throwing out much of the depth and detail they love in hopes of gaining a wider, usually non-geek audience. In trying to make a thing popular, they feel, the executives and moneymen have dispensed with most of the things that made it good, and what's left in such cases is watered-down pablum that doesn't appeal to anyone. As anyone but a Hollywood exec can plainly see, it's still possible to appeal simultaneously to the normie love of spectacle and the geek love of authenticity and world-building. Just look at Pokemon Detective Pikachu for a very recent example. As the normie population of a fandom grows, however, the money men tend to turn away from the geeks, who were never a guaranteed majority of the audience anyway, and try to make more money catering to the normie taste, which almost always winds up hurting the quality of the media in question. This is where gatekeeping comes from. This is where geek resentment of normies is born. As soon as the normies find something, the executives leap toward the obvious cash cow, and everything that made the show or franchise interesting in the first place suffers. It happened on The Walking Dead when the showrunners became too cowardly to kill off the normies' favorite characters and wound up writing the central characters of the entire series completely out of it. It happened in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, where a misguided reliance on spectacle and leftover goodwill from the original trilogy flung the geeks' interests straight out the window. And it happened in the Star Trek franchise. Geeks inevitably saw the reboot as disrespectful to the original series. In their minds, the J.J. Abrams reboot trilogy sacrificed the entire timeline of the original series, a series rooted in thought-provoking ideas and lore, for flashy spectacles in a misguided attempt to cater to a bigger audience, to cater to the normies. Star Trek Discovery, with all its cheap flash and shallow political allegory, has been called Star Trek for people who don't like Star Trek. And despite the reverence in which the character is held within the fandom, many geeks now look forward to the upcoming Picard series with fear and skepticism, because they have every reason to believe it won't be made with them in mind at all. I understand that executives and the powers that be are in this industry to make a profit. I understand the need to appeal to a general audience. After all, we all would like to make more money. However, from a geek point of view, it makes no sense to devalue a work or a franchise for the sake of a few extra dollars. This is exactly the reason why geeks have been vocal about their rejection of such devaluing of a product and why gatekeeping becomes a necessity. Geeks honestly feel, and I find it hard to blame them, that the fewer normies enter a fandom, the less probable it is that the folks who make their money out of it will alter, dilute, or water down the work itself. And those are just my thoughts. I am curious to know exactly what you think about this whole topic of gatekeeping and fandoms in general. If you have anything that you would like to share, certainly feel free to comment down below. And thanks for watching. Until next time, dear friends, this is Cynical Lindsay, signing off.